Welcome to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Craig Robertson.
And I'm Matt Easterling. Craig and I are board-certified family law specialists, which means we're basically professional storytellers. Together, we run one of the most successful boutique family law firms in Mississippi.
As divorce attorneys, we are professional problem solvers who work with real people during the most difficult seasons of their lives. And those life stories are what we'll be talking about in each episode.
So now, sit back, relax, take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. You found us, and what you're about to hear is going to help.
So if you've listened to our podcast for a while, you know we like to tell the stories of our clients and those who worked with us through the process of divorce and those who worked toward the process of reconciliation. We also talk to different types of professionals. We've had lots of counselors on the show, and today we are privileged to have someone who is both. Camille Eiland is a former client, and she's also a therapist at LifeWorks Counseling that has offices around Mississippi. And so, Camille, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to be here.
And Camille, we came to meet you in a different way than we normally meet most counselors. We met you through the actual divorce process. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about what happened?
Sure. So I guess I first met Craig in 2012. I was about 2 years into my marriage and had found out my husband was addicted to pornography. He just came out one day and confessed that to me and pretty much shattered my world as a very young wife. We did not have any children at the time, but I really wanted to save our marriage and wanted us to work. We went through a season where I thought maybe it could, but it did not. He moved out and I went through the process of filing, and we were separated a good long time, wound up kind of coming back around about 6 months after separation and decided to work things out. At that time, we began a lot of counseling, did a few years of that, couples counseling and individual counseling. I'd say maybe it was about 3 years of that. I thought our marriage was in a good place, pretty restored. And I had I guess you would call a second discovery. And this time it was of affairs.
So, Camille, what I heard you say was you guys were newly married. There was a discovery. And based on that discovery, you decided you were going to start walking through the process of divorce. Mm-hmm. But before the process really got off the ground, you started to do some work. You started to do therapy. And let me ask you this, because I don't think I know the answer to this question. When you first got married, was it your plan to be a counselor, or was it the interaction of the therapy process as it related to your marriage that really led you to do what you do now?
It actually was my plan probably since 15 or 16. It was always what I wanted to do. I loved relationships, family dynamics. So I had always planned on, I got my undergrad in communications and psychology and then planned to go to grad school.
So you said there was a second discovery. What happened?
So the second discovery was I discovered dating apps through iCloud. It kind of popped up on my computer when I had my phone plugged in. It was trying to put some apps, I think, on my phone. And when I confronted my husband about that, he admitted that they were his. And from there, I began to do my own digging. He told me there were no physical affairs that had come from that. But when I started going through cell phone records, I found out otherwise.
And I just want to be really clear. So you guys originally filed for divorce after you hadn't been married very long.
Right.
And you dismissed that case.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You guys reconciled, you were working through things, and then you, several years later, filed again after the second disclosure.
5 years later.
Discovery.
5 years later.
Camille, talk a little bit about, if you didn't say this word, you alluded to it, you had a little bit of an intuition. Yes. And, I live with 3 girls. I love them dearly. And that's one of my growth areas is I'm learning to trust the intuition of the women in my life. But my clients oftentimes, for various reasons, don't always trust their intuition. Speak about the intuition you had in that moment, which led you to the second discovery.
Right. Well, We weren't in a great place in our marriage. By this time, we had a child. So my daughter was 8 months old when I discovered the apps and following the affairs. Things weren't great between us. He would sleep on the couch a lot. He would tell me he just was not attracted to me. He didn't think he loved me anymore, but they weren't. He did not seem to want to pursue divorce, but I didn't think sexual acting out was on the table. But I knew something was off. I thought it was more depression and anxiety than a reopening of all of that.
We talk to our clients all the time when they come to see us in an initial consultation, and you've kind of talked a little bit about that when a person comes up to see us, we're trying to arm them with information. Camille, you talked about a restorative process that you and your now ex-husband went through during that season between the first discovery and then what you've talked about being the second discovery. What was that restorative process?
Yeah. So when we were separated, even when I did not think things were going to work out, I was going to weekly counseling every week. That was very vital for me to, keep my sanity. And I had discovery, I think, 1 month after graduating college. So I had my first real 40-hour-a-week job, and then I was reeling with all of that going on in my life. So I was a part of weekly counseling, and then I got plugged into a community of women who have experienced sexual betrayal, which also met weekly. And those were my two real lifelines, just being with people that really understood, because my family didn't and couldn't always, comfort me in the best ways or give me the best advice. It was kind of overwhelming. But this community and this group really understood. And so I was doing that on my own. Then when we did get back together, we engaged in that together. We did individual counseling. We did a lot of marital counseling. And then he too was going to a men's group of sexual brokenness.
Now, Camille, I know you're a woman of faith. And how did your faith impact the problems that you were facing in your marriage?
It was very confusing for me because I was trying to do everything I possibly could and was trying to always do the right thing and move forward with integrity. And life had dealt me a very heavy blow. I think I felt a lot of shame over who I had picked and red flags I had ignored in dating, and thought that things would just kind of work themselves out and we would grow up together and things would be okay. And they weren't. And so I really struggled with my faith. I would love to say that, that made my faith much stronger. But the truth is, in that season, I struggled a lot of where God was in my life, why he was allowing me to go through it.
So you've had your second discovery and you make the difficult decision to file for divorce again. I know that in your case, generally speaking, we hope that people are able to move through a divorce quickly. If a divorce has to happen, we hope that it can get started, everybody can come to the table, and we can come to a reasonable resolution. But unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen in your case. How long did the divorce process take from when you filed through ultimately a full-scale trial?
So I filed in the summer of 17, and it was my final trial was August of 19, and then the final hearing the following month. And so October of 19, it was final.
Wow.
Yeah, that's on the longer end, as we've talked about, obviously, through the process. Sometimes we tell people that the fastest possible timeline for divorce would be around 60 days, but that sometimes it can stretch out as long as a year, and sometimes it can stretch out even longer, like it did in your case.
Yeah, about 2.5.
Yeah. So talk about a little bit now. You were a very proactive client. You did a lot of things to help yourself. What did you do, and what advice would you give to a woman who might be in the same situation as you were in?
Yeah, I definitely helped myself in those ways. Because it saved me money to do a lot of my own research and a lot of my own digging. But it was just good for me to bring me into, I think, clarity and reality of what I was really dealing with. It helped me kind of face the truth, to go through phone records and bank records and uncover what was really going on helped keep me in reality, for lack of a better word. But I always did that with people around me because it was very sad and traumatic and just so much trauma of it all. So I would often have a friend with me to go through records with me or to record my conversations with different people on the phone. Having that support was so key for me that I wasn't sitting at home in a dark room doing this alone and just sliding into more and more grief.
We've a lot of our guests have used the word trauma. How do you define trauma?
Well, I define trauma as a level of stress, whether that's brought on by an incident or an event that's beyond your ability to cope well and handle well. It kind of overtakes your body and your emotions.
There are people out there that are listening right now that are either going through the process that you just finished or getting ready to embark on that process. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to those people and the best way to handle the divorce process?
Mm-hmm. Well, divorce is awful. No matter how short or how long it is, it's a ripping apart of a family that you never intended to separate. So I would say to get informed, to really arm yourself with information, even if that scares you, even if it's stuff you don't think you want to know, to try to face your fear in that sense, and that to not go at it alone, to not, I would really encourage someone, if they were talking to me about it, to not be alone, to lean on your friends, to lean on your community, to get counseling. Most of us need it in a season like that.
Camille, you brought up a good point, and you talked about being very proactive in information gathering, but oftentimes we see clients or potential clients who are in denial. They stick their head in the sand, for lack of a better mm-hmm. word. What advice would you give to people that are in that place?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're likely in a place of survival and not wanting what they think could be happening to really be true. I would advise them that they need to face that, whatever that is, to kind of come into the light with it. And it's often easier to do that with someone. So if that is, whatever that is, in my case of a lot of infidelity, if that's calling that phone number, or if you saw that app or that pop-up, whatever that is, pursuing that, confronting that instead of sweeping it under the rug, you're really only prolonging your own hurt by not facing it.
Yeah, you're talking about pursuing the truth.
Right.
And I've heard the analogy of, if you could imagine yourself down in the basement, and in the basement there is all this junk and clutter, but the lights are off. Mm-hmm. And so all you have is a flashlight mm-hmm. and you see what's right in front of you. But sometimes what happens to a person right before they come to see us is the lights get turned on. And then at that point they see the broken bottles and skeletons and the wreckage of what their life is, where they were just trying to navigate mm-hmm. with a little flashlight. Mm-hmm. Camille, you were one of the unfortunate clients who actually has to have a full-blown trial mm-hmm. for there to be closure and resolution in your case. One of the reasons that it took so long for your case to end. What did you do to prepare yourself emotionally leading up to the trial?
Mm-hmm. Well, kind of to speak to what I have is I stay in counseling even now. So that kind of keeps my head clear and keeps me in check.
You mean counselors need counselors too?
Yes, I'm a huge believer. You need to know what it's like to sit on the other side of the chair.
Well, and certainly the person that you want to work with, you want them to have done their
right.
own work too,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A popular slogan with counseling is you can't take a client further than you've been yourself. So what you haven't worked out in your own life, what blind spots you have, you're not going to be able to take a client there. So to the degree I know myself is to the degree I can help others know themselves. So staying in my own therapy is important to me, staying connected to that same group of women. And just the nature of my job is to sit with other people and their stories. And inadvertently, that helps me give perspective to mine and kind of promotes really my own healing in a lot of ways.
What was the scariest thing for you going into the trial? Because trial is a scary thing for anybody.
Yeah. Trial is very intimidating. For me, maybe since it was so prolonged, like I just felt very ready. I had all the information a person could need. I felt that I had all my ducks in a row. And to me, the more knowledge you have, the more prepared you are, the less fear I had. So I had a lot of adrenaline, I think, going into trial. But I guess my fear was the ultimate decision was completely out of my hands, and it was up to a man that I did not know, had never met, knew nothing about my life until the day I walked into the room. And so just releasing the outcome of the most precious person in the world to me to a stranger was very scary. So that's why I wanted to be armed with every possible bit of information I could be.
Well, I know that you were about as involved in your own case as just about any other client that we've ever had. And that was great. I think that probably mitigated some of the fears that you would have had because you were so plugged in to your own case and to all of the different facets of it that you really were ready. And oftentimes I worry that other clients don't feel that way.
Yeah, I tried to use my nervousness and anxiety and lack of control and funnel that towards information gathering, preparation, instead of fear and shrinking back. For me, it was very, I guess, counterphobic, if you will.
I'm certain that, there were times throughout the case that you were hearing advice from our office that maybe you didn't want to hear. How did you deal with stuff like that?
The hardest part, I think, for me was just my case continuing to drag due to factors with the military. And it got postponed for over a year at one point when we had a final hearing date set in early 18. Then it got pushed a year and a half back in 19. That was extremely discouraging for me. I definitely went through, a few months of just crying very often and just a hopeless feeling of this is never going to end. This grief is going to swallow me up. It didn't. I came out of it. Thank God. Time passes as it always does. But that was an extremely hard time where I just didn't see an end in sight. And neither of us were giving in on our side.
A lot of situations can be resolved. But when two people have very different ideas about what is best for their child, what's healthy for their child, it's very common that we end up in a courtroom setting. I tell people all the time that a real custody dispute doesn't settle. And unfortunately, in your case, you had a real custody dispute because what you believed was best for your child was very different than your now ex-spouse believed was best for your child.
Right. That made it very hard because, we were both just had our heels dug in. Settling was not an option. We tried many times and it didn't happen.
I hope you're enjoying our show. My name is Cassie, and my job is to take care of the Robertson and Easterling clients. I love helping people. Listen, the lawyers in our office are some of the smartest people I know. I know that you're scared and emotional, and that's totally okay. But when the plane's going down, it's important to put your oxygen mask on first before you can care for those around you. Request a consultation from our website or just give me a call. Everything's going to be okay. I can't wait to meet you, but until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy the second half of today's show.
So dealing with the different setbacks and delays and natural bumps in the road that happens in any type of prolonged litigation, how important was it to really trust the people that were giving you the advice?
It was vital. It helped give me sanity in an otherwise very crazy-making process. Divorce is very... it can be very traumatic. In my case, it was. And so to have people that I very much trusted, that were very clear and sound with me, very direct with me, was very helpful to kind of help me sink my teeth into, and again, keep me in reality of this may not go how you want, but here's what's in your ability to control right now, which often isn't much.
Yeah, I tell people that, there's certain things that we can control. We can control how effectively we communicate with our client. We can control how transparent we are, how aggressive we are, how much hustle we put in a case. But there's certain things that we can never control. We can't control your ex-spouse or soon-to-be ex-spouse. We can't control the judge or the judge's calendar or counsel opposite's calendar. And, so we control the controllables and we trust the process as best we can. Was that your experience?
Right. Definitely. Because all of those factors are out of our control. So again, for me, what was in my control was my emotional health, like my ability to go to my job and function every day and be a great mother and stay present with myself, gather information, and just be prepared for when the day came.
People ask me all the time, Craig, how do you do what you do? Matt, how do you do what you do? How do you work in marital dysfunction and not be a crazy person or be in a straitjacket? And I tell them that, it gives me perspective. It makes me grateful. I oftentimes learn vicariously through the mistakes of my clients. I have represented people for 20 years now. And so a lot of people have done a lot of stupid things over the course of that 20 years. And I didn't have to do those stupid things to learn the lessons and to see the ramifications. And so I've got the same question for you, Camille. You went through a traumatic, long, drawn out, expensive divorce. How do you sit with people who are on the same journey?
Yeah, it has so deepened, I guess, my empathy for others. I can connect with people's pain and their trauma in ways that you really can't from just reading about it or reading a textbook. And, knowing how to do something is so different than having lived it yourself. And so walking with people, whether that is sexual betrayal or, abuse or just all the various traumas, transitions of life. But my ability to empathize is so great. And so, I don't know, just so heartfelt that I in fact, prefer a client who does have a more heavy emotional burden than just merely a, more easy kind of few session type fix.
You can't talk about divorce without talking about grief. And, when there's a death, there's finality. But I think with a marriage, there is always the hope of restoration. There's always the hope that not necessarily that things could be restored to the way they were, but that things could be restored to the way you hope they would be. Right. And like any, in grief, there's seasons of grief. There's depression, there's denial, there's anger, there's bargaining. And people in the process of divorce are usually at different places. In other words, my spouse might be really angry, but I'm very depressed. And these emotions, they cycle as time goes on.
Camille, did you, experience those things that Craig was just talking about? Depression, denial, anger,
absolutely,
bargaining?
Yes. Specifically to the depression piece, that one was hard for me, and it may be because mine drug out for so long. But when you finally, make that decision that, for me, divorce was my only option. That there was no hope of us getting back together. That was not a desire of both parties. So I was at home, with this 8-month-old, and the months would pass, and, it was just me and her, and sleep regression was happening. I was watching her crawl for the first time by myself, learning to walk for the first time. I was experiencing all of that alone. And that was such a lonely season in my life, and so much sadness. So to someone who is going through that and feels so isolated and alone, I would again speak to just, it is so necessary to connect with somebody either who's gone through that, if that's somebody in your church or a small group or counseling or, group therapy. A lot of churches offer grief groups, things like that. But I could not have done it without support. I can remember, many nights of probably when she was around 1, I couldn't get her to sleep at night. She would cry. We would try so many things. I could only get her to sleep in the car. And I would be in my robe and slippers at midnight, riding her around our neighborhood and bringing her back in and setting her down. And then just, crying myself to sleep. Like, why am I going through all of this alone when I wanted this marriage? I wanted it more than anything to work. And I'm doing all of it alone. It was a very just that feeling can just come in and swallow you up if you let it.
What I heard you say was, and that was so well said, what I heard you say was, though, in the beginning of that you sought community.
Right.
You sought a vehicle for processing your emotion through your own work, through your own therapy, and that you made a me problem a we solution in the community of women that you surrounded yourself with.
Right. I probably would have, been truly clinically depressed if I had not. I had to get up every day and make a conscious choice to, that's what it took for me to take care of her and to be the mother I wanted to be. I had to make myself get up, go to work every day, connect with somebody, let them know where I was at. The anger stage of grief lasted a long time for me too. I would punch my pillow a lot, or just practical things like scream in my car when I was alone on my lunch break. Ride around, cry to music. Like you have to let yourself feel that and express it, because there's so many other demands when you're going through divorce and you become a single parent. In my case, I had to get all of that angst and energy in my body out through a healthy means, and not just go internal and truly manifest depression and not get out of the bed, or go external and rage at everyone and, push people away in my life. So I had to get all of that out.
Yeah, we heard one of our previous guests talk about that, and she's a therapist, and she talked about having a box. And, you put all the emotion and all the things that you go through during the course of a day or a week or a month or a lifetime, and you've got to empty that box to stay healthy and to stay whole.
Absolutely.
I know one of the worst things about grief, whether it's with a divorce or with death or anything, is that most people around you, grief makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
So they just want it to go away.
Right.
And people often think that grief, it just ends when the divorce ends. And that's not true, is it?
No, not at all. Grief has not ended for me. I certainly don't cry, even weekly anymore. But there's a lingering sadness. And the final, piece in the grief cycle is acceptance. That can take, years to get to. I feel like in some ways I've come to acceptance, but in other ways it's very hard to accept a reality that you never wanted, never asked for, feel you didn't contribute to. It's a long road, and you're right. Grief makes people very uncomfortable. Again, kind of a plug for why going to your family or people very close to you who want you to cheer up, but it's not a quick cheer up. Let's have a girls' night. I'll feel better. This is my new normal, and my new normal I'm really struggling to adjust to, and that may take somebody else kind of outside the box to really speak into and to walk with you with. Because it's not a quick fix. It's not an easy emotion shift.
So what would you say to somebody who maybe has a close loved one that is going through a divorce? Like, what are ways that they can help them?
Yeah, I would say accept the person you love right where they're at. So if that is sit on the couch with them and just, not really offering advice, not trying to fix, not trying to give them a kind of simple shift out of that, but more of just what you're going through is awful, and I'm absolutely here for you every step of the way, whatever that looks like. I'm not trying to fix this or change this for you, because it is your new normal and it sucks.
Camille, we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, dealing with grief and the darker side of it all. But I want people to know there is a light at the end of the tunnel, isn't there?
Right. Absolutely. I really love my new normal. My life with my now 3.5-year-old is wonderful and great. And it's not perfect. It's not a beautiful box with a big red bow, and it's all sunshine and rainbows, of course. But I'm out of the chaos that I was so used to living in and had really adjusted my life to. My life is very calm, still waters now. And I have my own sense of what I want my life to be about, what direction it's heading in. I love, there's so much, hope for my future, even though it's not all right before my eyes and perfect. It's heading in a really great direction. And I'm very happy with the direction it's heading in.
So what I'm hearing is there is hope at the end. things do get better. It's never going to
Definitely.
be perfect,
Right.
except the fact that it's not going to be, but that you can do this and you can get through it.
Right. Absolutely. Getting out of the hurt and the pain, like a huge step of that is getting that divorce off of you, off of your back, all of that just stress and pressure. Getting off of me was a huge weight lifted, and I feel much lighter now and much more ready for my future, I guess, instead of just kind of staying in the past and ruminating and marinating on all of those facts and heaviness. Now it's okay. Like, now what does the future look like? It's a perspective shift for me.
Camille, you're now on the backside of the divorce process. And although you didn't have a perfect outcome, you did have resolution, and you are moving forward now. Let's shift our focus a little bit and talk about your practice. Talk about how you help people.
Okay. Yeah, I absolutely am so glad that all of that is behind me, and hopefully has propelled me to being an even better therapist.
What type of client do you usually see, Camille?
So about half my caseload is kids or teens, and the other half young adult women, married couples, and I do see a lot of women who have been betrayed in their marriage, which is just, such a prevalent thing now. And with LifeWorks, with Ron and Eva Hunter being there, being certified sex addiction therapists, that's kind of almost a branding part of LifeWorks. So we have a lot of clients like that, which, my unique story being that way too, gives me a unique perspective to offer spouses that are going through that.
Camille, we've run out of time for this episode, but thank you. Thank you for your vulnerability. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing your journey. Mm-hmm. Thank you for talking about the emotional journey, the emotional component of what you've been through. And how can a person, if they've connected with you and your story and feels like they could use your help, how would they connect with you? Yeah,
so they can go to our website, which is lifeworksms.com, or they can call our number, which is 601-790-0583, and call to set up an appointment, or you can request an appointment online.
Do you have any information about the women's support groups that you've worked with?
Yeah, so we actually just started last week, Monday nights at 6:15 at LifeWorks. We've kind of kicked off a new workbook, and we've got groups for either newcomers of sexual betrayal, or if you're year 2 and beyond, and then just a codependency general group as well. And then I also do a lunch group therapy every Thursday for just general codependency.
Thank you so much for being here today and for everything you do for our community. I know that you've got a really bright future ahead of you in counseling.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Y'all are awesome. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for spending time with us.
We'd love to hear from you if you need our help. You can request a consultation from our website in less than 5 minutes. If you liked our show, please subscribe to our podcast so you'll be one of the first to know when our next episode drops.
Have a great rest of your day, and remember, there's nothing wrong with arming yourself with information. On behalf of Matt and our entire team, thanks for listening. This podcast is not a substitute for an attorney. All information is provided as a general reference and public service. Listening to this podcast does not create a professional relationship with Robertson and Easterling or any of its attorneys or guests. This podcast may be considered advertising under applicable rules, and therefore free background information is available upon request. For a full disclaimer, please visit our website, www.robertson.ms.